Junglers are very frequently described as either farmers or gankers. Players always ask how they can gank when they're a farming jungler and how they can farm when they're a ganking jungler. What you should realize is that it's way more of a spectrum, and typically being around the middle using a balanced jungle pressure rule, you can simultaneously farm and gank as well as deny the enemy jungler. In this video, we will look at just that and how you can apply this to your own games in order to ensure you are reaching at least 7 CS PM and potentially 60% KP. And if you want more specifics with my live coaching over your shoulder, don't forget I have now released my Diana, Bel'Veth, Viego, as well as Echo guides to go along with my Volibear and Warwick, all available on Zada.gg through the links below. And in theory, this principle does work on every single jungler. However, what I'm talking about today will definitely benefit those meta junglers who can still farm reasonably fast. Can you do this kind of stuff with a Warwick? Yes, but then you're more reliant on second and third sequences with your Tiamat, but your typical meta junglers will definitely have a small advantage if they execute this correctly, hence why they are meta junglers. And on that note, you will see Diana versus Elise. Now I'm showing Elise here because this will work very well against any sort of high-risk jungler that you're against, but also work very well against farming junglers. However, as you observe the level 1 killings, which Elise wasn't at because she was a little late out of base, you should note that a ganking jungler will have a much more visceral and obvious response to the balanced jungle pressure rule, whereas a farming jungler simply will become a little bit desperate. And remember, that's always the plan. It's to make the enemy jungler uncomfortable and force them into bad plays. As such, it's pretty obvious at this stage that due to the killings of the bot lane, you can presuppose that the Diana will start on the blue buff. However, even if you weren't sure about that, the Elise knows by getting a leash on the blue, she sees the Diana's also getting a leash on the blue. Now typically here you are looking to make sure you execute your early game plan, understanding that win condition, and remember that win condition can evolve throughout the stages of the game. It's not necessarily what you thought it would be in Champion Select. For Elise, a 4 camp into a Jax dive against a tank top laner is seemingly quite obvious, except for top laners. Whereas a Diana 4 clearing and then looking for some sort of crab or opportunistic ganking action is also kind of obvious. It's what we do after this as a jungler that will determine the rest of the game as well as who has tempo control. Diana does her full sequence. While she's finishing up the Krugs, you see, Elise 4 camp into a top lane dive. How surprising. Now typically most of you, if you were the Diana, would decide, okay, well that sucks, now I'm behind a little bit, she's gonna get the top scuttle and go mid lane, I better get the bottom scuttle, look at their bot lane going back to base, I should go to base too and then sequence again. Yeah, no. F key, click the map, look, what happened bot lane? Oh, my bot lane got a kill, forced him out, the enemy support is still there, level 2, no sums, why don't I just go on and, kill her? Please practice your dives. You're seeing this so often in high elo, whether they're ganking or a farming jungler. Looking for that push into a dive at level 3 is absolutely crucial as a jungler in order to snowball the game. You can't say, well, no one's gonna do this in silver, gold, platinum, diamond, or whatever. Yeah, I know they're not gonna do it. That's why it's on you to actually force the issue, try and get it done, and learn how to juggle tower aggro with the randomness of your teammates. Now, we've killed the Lulu, we're falling back out. Obviously, Elise took top crab, sees this, goes mid lane, goes bottom crab. She has created this huge prior for her mid lane to roam on down. This is very notable, and I want you to keep it in your mind as we go forward. You are seeing the enemy team try to take on the Diana in a huge minion wave. Remember, while melee minions will do that 12 damage for their first 5 upgrades, caster minions are doing double that damage at level 1 and will keep scaling up that damage with every level they get. And then of course siege minions do even more. That means if they want to fight you in a wave, please use the wave on the first rotation, especially level 3-4. It is a hell of a lot of damage, hundreds of damage that laners can take while trying to fight you within the wave. The same goes for you. Don't overstay, go back and forth, do your damage, durability update doing its work as you can see from these clips. And now we go on ahead and fake it back, and this is why it's important to base within the vision if you have the ability to turn this into a kill, because they will try and cancel it. They cannot help themselves. Don't shop, don't window shop, turn and kill the Lulu. Very, very nice, and now you can hold the wave yourself. Thus, so far, we have a full clear. We've ignored the scuttle. That's right, we ignored it because we saw an opportunistic kill and dive that we could do, which is worth way more than a 20% reduction crab, and at least would be forced to rotate down to it. We assessed the fight, we did our job, we held a wave. That's everything you could want as any jungler. Full clear plus a gank plus a kill plus holding a wave. Absolute Christmas. Now here's where the more balanced approach comes, because typically you would be told by a lot of coaches, hey, go sequence again, farm, get strong yourself. Well, yes, you are investing in yourself essentially for the majority of helos, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can't have a buddy come along for the ride. It also means if you understand lane states, minion optimization, and experience gains, why you can't exploit it, force the enemy jungler to be desperate, force them into having nothing else to do but to farm. The idea for the Diana is, okay, look, she's gonna try and dive the top lane again. If I go Krog's full sequence up now, I'm not gonna be there in time to stop the dive and defend my blue buff. Therefore, I should do my Raptors, Wolves, Grump, and then of course I can be in the area. because you realized that while the Ahri rotated down to the bottom lane with the prio created by Elise, your Orianna stayed mid lane, shoved it, went back to base, and as you should know, around that 5-minute 30 wave is when the mid laners should typically get their level 6, barring any sort of randomness happening with roams and kills and deaths. That will not apply to the Ahri because she was down bottom lane. She missed a lot of minions mid lane and got denied a lot by the Orianna. And now while you might think, okay, look, I spent a lot of time there ganking, I should go farming now. No, you don't have to full sequence always. Look to cut that sequence short if you want to match the tempo of the Elise. That means when the Orianna pings and says, hey, come mid lane, hey, react to it. Should you recognize this yourself? Yes, you should. But mostly you know that the Ahri has no flash, you know Orianna is 6, and you can simply abuse this with a beautiful lane gank. There's no need to necessarily go underneath, run into the Elise. You also know the Elise, while she had a good beginning, really didn't snowball enough in that first phase and might be looking to do a camp into the gank. Because the Orianna is going to be pushing, you need to make sure you do this before the Elise gets in the picture. Look at that, we did a full sequence, and now instead of doing a full sequence again, we were going to 3 camp it, and instead of doing that, we just 1 camp ganked it, because that pressure made sense. Because you are F-King, you have information knowledge, and you are paying attention to your surroundings. I mean, most of you should have watched Batman Begins, you know what Ra's al Ghul told you to do. And now yes, we can fall back to our blue quadrant, finish it. You would have seen the Elise hold mid after Raptors. Where's she gonna go next? Most likely RNG Scuttle bot side, blue buff bot side, tier 3 Grump and tier 3 Wolves. Don't go and AFK farm here and ignore the Elise. Don't go and play equal and opposite when you now have the lead over them. Balanced jungling means not only farming well and ganking well, it also means counter ganking and invading well. And so you can pretty much logically assume, hey look, you know, she's going to the bottom side, you bot laners are pushing up, at least she's gonna show up. So you would have seen the spam pings on the animated minimap, move on down to counter gank this. If the gank is absolutely free because the enemy bot lane is pushing, go straight forward. If the Krugs are available and then the Raptors in the red, and obviously the Elise hasn't yet ganked, do your Krugs and then Shadow because it's obvious she's gonna have to do this. It's also obvious because the Ahri has shoved and moved down mid lane again, so they're looking for the 4v2, but the Fed Diana is there. We shove and then we remember kill conversion ratio, which means take a dragon. Because this happened a little bit later in the game than you might necessarily want, that means that Herald is already available, so you could look to straight up contest that, but as a balanced jungler who applies this pressure across the map, sometimes it means knowing to give one of those objectives up. It also means that you have Raptors and red on the bottom side after the dragon, you also have that Jax with a huge lead on the top side, you cannot go and contest a random Herald, and in the Elisa situation, this is the best outcome for you. Take your red, hippity hoppity the wall, take the Herald, and then look to counter jungle and dive top lane. That's the best thing you can do in this moment for your win condition. Diana also knows this, which means when someone's roaming the river and being where they shouldn't, you catch them out and you obliterate them. Then you go ahead and scan. Remember, use the full duration of the scanner. Don't walk onto a bush and scan in one spot for 10 seconds. Activate it so that you can walk for 10 seconds and scan a whole area. And I've made a video from my perspective of this as well, even as a Zyra, even as a Kai'Sa, as a Volibear, as an Ornn. I've worked with challenger junglers and shown it in videos as well, where even though they don't get the Herald, they can still use the pressure they've set up for their win condition bot lane to get that first tower. They just go do some counter jungling, some scanning, some divings, and then they just smack it with their basic abilities. At some point, if you want the Nexus, my friends, you have to hit towers. That's what a MOBA is. And because you've done this so beautifully, now you go back to base. Of course, we're going full AP with the new AP ratio buffs on Diana's E. And as Elise will have now found herself quite desperate to try and match your tempo, she would have forced herself to counter jungle thinking, aha, I get something back, and delayed the use of that Herald on the top side. This means because of the most perfect application of the balanced pressure jungle rule, you're now going straight to the top lane to defend this tower pusher and try and get yourself some kills. You may not get kills, but at the very least you can push them off. If you get kills, great. Shove the wave out for denial and maybe get a few more plates if you can. This is huge if you did take that bottom lane tower and now your pieces are moving around the map and you can try and get more than just 5 plates, maybe 10, maybe even 15 for that pure snowball. However, should the opportunity not arise in the most perfect sense, you can simply fall on down and now you can do a full sequence again. This is the key. Everything we've done so far has been good for our farming tempo, good for our farming cadence, but you have to keep it up. And ironically, because you take that tower and make the map a bit dark for the enemy team, that removes a part of the map that they can just willy-nilly walk into and think, aha, I'm gonna take a tower and do a gank. So you do have more time to sequence while looking at the map and seeing where you need to collapse and sort of cut in. Here the Diana decides to cut in after the Raptors and wastes a lot of time trying to force something mid lane. You definitely had enough time to go to the Krugs and then kind of float into the river for vision control and set your team up for that second dragon, which is what we are currently looking at. After the dragon, fall back to your red, your Krugs, reset the quadrant, and now we can go topside again. In your lower elo games, you will definitely have enemy laners like the Jax, anyone who's fed just overcommit, overpush, put themselves in a bad and precarious position. As a super fed jungler, because you've done all of this so far, please collapse 2v1 and kill them. Use your lead. You win. And if you have these quiet moments, it's a great time to keep your farm up by sequencing your jungle extremely quickly. The biggest tip I give in these mid-game phases is if you want to shadow your team in the mid lane, because obviously you want to be present in those fights, go outside in, gromp wolves, look mid lane, can I cut in? Do I need to cut in? Can I do raptors? I can still cut in from there. If not, and you're looking to go to the bot side, then you can do your inside out, your wolves gromp or your raptors krugs, and then look to balance on the side wave by killing someone over pushing, which we've already done once this game. Otherwise, the biggest pressure point here is continually pushing that lead. We need to take these other tier 1s, which can be kind of difficult against a team comp with a lot of wave clear. And that's where you kind of show them that you're the OG comic book Hulk and not some kind of rinsed down version that doesn't really do anything, and you go and smash their whole jungle. Get into their camps, get into their jungle, put the wards down. If there's a tower to take and a dive to be had, make sure you do that. If your solo laner does it without you, c'est la vie. But the point is that we are proximal to this play, so should we be needed, we are available. This process can happen a few times, especially in slower games. The key is, as you're seeing, maintain your farm tempo, path in directions where you think you might be needed for a fight, and you can see now the importance of you holding towers in that early game as a jungler, any jungler. Like that free experience, 1, super great for level 6 spikes, and 2, keeps that tower up for these particular moments. If you have more light than dark on the map because of those towers compared to them, that means they're going to have to push up to try and take something eventually, and that's when you get more kills, more kill conversion ratios into dragons, more of a stat and effective gold lead, which means it's now easier to push into the jungle for those traps, for those deep wards, to force those team fights, to push the waves, to fight around barons, and to try and end games. Now this game was a very balanced pressure jungle rule, farming, ganking, not really invading too much, but definitely tracking and making sure the enemy jungler couldn't execute a win conditions or game plan. Likewise, as juiced as the Jax was, it doesn't really matter when you are a super fed Diana or super fed jungler. You want to come out of that mid-game phase at around 15 minutes able to win 2v2s and 1v1s quite handily. If you are not, look for those early dives. Look and pay attention to level 6 spikes based upon roam timers and regular back timers and deaths and which lane is kind of hung around. Yeah, you want a sequence, but don't do it at the expense of what the map is presenting to you. The Elise in this game presented so much opportunity to the Diana, and Diana took it, executed it, and really didn't interact with the Elise too much, but the Elise was forced into desperation plays and honestly not being able to do anything because of the balanced approach of the Diana. In the end, the Diana will hit almost 60% KP, does have that 8.5 CSPM, which is obviously very, very good. So if you can reduce the risk of ganks by using intelligent jungling and balancing it with your farming sequencing, which is what you want to get strong farming, is what makes you gold rich and obviously experience rich, you will find that you're having way less feeding laners because you are actively helping at least 2 out of the 3, and the one that is fed on the enemy team, you can shut down because you are fed. If you do want to understand a bit more about a close game and pushing the map here and using that mid-game lead to close, I've made many videos on them, one of which is the video in the box on the top right. And if you do want to understand the most important rule of all when looking to climb out a low elo, click the video in the box on the bottom left.